Yo guys, what's going on? I'm Tim, joined by John and Justin. This is our baseball chat. Guys, what's going on?
Nothing, Tim. What's going on?
Well, I'm good. I'm currently on vacation. That is why these videos are being posted. And throughout this entire week, we're going to be giving you a lot of countdowns, a lot of Dream Team type things. One day this week, we're going to give you the top 5 stadiums in the MLB. It's a thing we did on the Blitz Hardcore podcast a while ago, but we're going to be reposting it here on the Real Sports Talk. We're going to give you the top players in the 90s in the MLB. So we're going to give you basically an all MLB week, and then if anything big comes up, Justin or Akeem or somebody will be covering it like any other time. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through the era where we really grew up watching, the 2000s era, and we're going to be going through position by position, and we go catcher, first base, all 9 positions. There's a DH we added in, and there's 5 starting spots and a closer, and we're going to give you the best players of the 2000s. We'll also give you some honorable mentions. One thing that I do want to throw in before we get started with our list is that we did allow steroid players onto this list. I am not someone who supports that or thinks that people who are connected with steroids should be in the Hall of Fame or anything like that. But when I'm making a list of who the best players are, I'm just going to make it based off who played the best during that era, and I'm not going to worry about this guy was on steroids or whatever. It doesn't change that they were, but that's not the point of doing this list. That's for another time. So we're going to begin at catcher. We're going to go to first, second, third, short, every position, obviously, and we'll go from there. We'll begin at catcher. We'll start with John. John, who is your best catcher of the 2000s decade as we begin our 2000s MLB Dream Team?
I got Joe Mauer as catcher. He batted .323 and with 87 homers through the 2000s. Won an MVP and came into 2004 is when he started out and really just got better in every season.
I have Jorge Posada, and here's why. He played a little bit longer during the 2000s. That's certainly something to take into consideration. And he was on some really good teams, caught some really good starters, handled the staff well out in New York. During the 2000s, he batted .283 with 208 home runs and 809 RBIs. He was a catcher that actually, as he got older, he became a better hitter. So as earlier on in the 2000s, his hitting numbers weren't as good as they were during the mid-2000s, when really, even though he's at like 34, 35 years old, he was in his prime. His 162 game average during this decade was hitting .283 with 26 home runs and 102 RBIs. So that's my guy. Justin, who are you going with as your catcher for the 2000s?
I got Ivan Rodriguez. Yes, this is a guy who plays great defensive baseball. This guy did not hit a lot of home runs in the 2000s era, but you know what this guy brought to the plate? This guy brought in a solid batting average. On an average, looking at from the stats from 2000 to 2009, this guy hit about 300. I think he hit about 300 about 4 out of the 5 years, 5 years out of the 9 years in the era that we're talking about. But you know what? This guy played great defensive baseball, and he had a solid batting average throughout the era.
Yeah, no question. And the one thing I do want to say is, sure, we had 3 different guys on that position, but we didn't say, I need to go with this guy, you need to go with this guy. We did not talk about who we picked. We just said, we're making our list, and we're going to come together and do a video. So there's going to be certain positions where we have 3 different guys, where we have 2 guys agree, 1 guy disagrees, or we could all have the same one, like I think we will most likely have at first base, where Albert Pujols headlines it for me. If you were making a list of the best overall players during this decade, Albert Pujols would have a very good case. Obviously now he's with the Angels, but you talk about Albert Pujols with the Cardinals during this decade when he came in 2001, won the Rookie of the Year, won 3 MVPs in 05, 08, and 09, won the Rookie Year 2001, NLCS MVP in 2004. He won the Hank Aaron Award in 2003, a Gold Glove in 2006, Silver Sluggers in 01, 04, and 08, and the Roberto Clemente Award, which is more of a citizenship thing, but it does involve what type of impact you've had on the game. So I thought that I would throw that in there. During these 9 seasons that he played, replacing Mark McGwire there, he hit .334 2004 with 366 home runs, 1,112 RBIs, and had a .628 slugging percentage. During this decade, Albert Pujols set himself up to be one of the best overall players in the history of the MLB. Now, he hasn't started off the next decade necessarily on the same pace, but he had a tremendous 2000s era. Justin, who do you have at first?
I agree with you. I had Albert Pujols at first baseman. You pretty much covered that, my friend.
John, what about you?
I got Albert Pujols as well. Like you said, he had 334, through the 2000s, and was a 3-time MVP. And he was in the top 10 of MVP voting in every single season.
Yeah, and that really shows how dominant of a player he was. And in most of those seasons, he was one or two. To win, he won 3 MVPs during this era. He really dominated this era, and he was, if not the best player, he was the second best player. There's one other guy that really even has a case against him. At second base, this is going to be kind of an interesting position. A lot of guys are going to go with Chase Utley. A lot of guys will look in a different direction. But a lot of people forget just how good Jeff Kent was, especially early on in this decade when he was hitting in the same lineup as Barry Bonds. And a lot of those years where you saw Barry Bonds hitting 60 and 70 and 50 home runs, Jeff Kent was right there hitting 35, 40. I think one year he hit 48 home runs. In normal non-steroid years, Jeff Kent could have won a few MVPs hitting the way that he did during this decade. In 9 seasons with the Giants, Astros, and Dodgers, Jeff Kent hit 216 home runs, 848 RBIs, 45 stolen bases, and a .518 slugging percentage. Chase Utley came on a little too late to really have a great case against Jeff Kent. Jeff Kent was a great fielder as well. Overall, throughout this era, he wasn't known as the nicest guy, but on the field, man, Jeff Kent was a beast.
Yeah, I also have Jeff Kent. He was the MVP in 2000, won the Silver Slugger in 2000, 2001, 2002, and 2005. One of the best hitting second basemen arguably ever.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff Kent, this guy should have won the MLB MVP on multiple occasions. This guy hit for average, a power hitter. This guy is probably the greatest second baseman in the early 2000s era, and I'm glad that we all came to an agreement with this. This guy also played a big pivotal role in the early greater days of the Houston Astros, and finishing off his career with the Dodgers was just icing on the cake.
Jeff Kent will no doubt be a Hall of Famer when it comes up. Now, I mean, I don't know if Jeff Kent did steroids or not. He played with Barry Bonds. I guess it's not fair to necessarily just be guilty by association. It wouldn't shock me if it came out that he did steroids, but as far as we know, he didn't, so he will be a Hall of Famer in all likelihood. At third base, and this will pretty much be a lock for everyone, except unless you put him at shortstop, which he did play early on with the Texas Rangers. But Alex Rodriguez, who played during this decade with the Texas Rangers, actually in 2000 and 2001 he played with the Seattle Mariners, where he began his career, and people forget how good some of those Mariners teams were. Then he signed the biggest deal in the history of the MLB when he went to the Texas Rangers on a 10-year, $250 million deal, was then traded 3 years into that deal with to the Yankees, won 2 MVPs during this era, hit 435 home runs in that 10-year period, hit it for an average of .303, had 1,243 RBIs, 179 stolen bases, a .586 slugging percentage. He won a Silver Slugger, I believe, 6 times. He won the Hank Aaron Award 4 times. 2 Gold Gloves. I believe they were both at shortstop, but he might have won one at third base. 3 MVPs during this era. He was not known as the greatest playoff performer, but in 2009 he did get over that and got a World Series while leading the Yankees to a World Series. It's similar to what LeBron James just did in the NBA. Alex Rodriguez kind of got over the hump in 2009 and had a great playoffs to lead the Yankees to a World Series. So he did pretty much everything during this era, John.
Yeah, I also have Alex Rodriguez. I think most people probably would. He's won the MVP 3 times during the 2000s, batted .303 with 435 home runs, 7-time Silver Slugger, went to the playoffs 8 times, and won a World Series.
I agree with you guys again. We all have the same player. A-Rod has only won the World Series once, and I guarantee you by the time he retires, he's currently, 36, 37 years old right now. I think the Yankees, with the greatest season they're having right now, this team is going to make... me and Tim agree that they're going to go to the World Series. And I think this is the year the Yankees do it, and A-Rod's going to retire with a total of 2 rings. I think with A-Rod, he is probably the best third baseman in the 2000s era.
Yeah, no question. Chipper Jones certainly has a good case. And to elaborate on what Justin was saying, we're not saying he's going to retire after this year, but I think that we both agree that the Yankees have a very good chance to win a ring at the end of this season. We both picked them preseason, and we'll see what happens with that. But Alex Rodriguez certainly has a very good case to be the best third baseman and the best overall player during the 2000s era. Obviously, the steroid question comes up. That's going to be what keeps him out of the Hall of Fame in all likelihood. And there was a time around 2007, because 2006 was a disappointing year. The Yankees were out of the playoffs again, where A-Rod, it kind of looked like, was going to be traded out of New York. There were rumors, and this isn't even a joke, after 2006, that they were going to trade him to the White Sox, and the main piece in the deal was going to be Joe Crede. I don't make this stuff up. And then in 2007, he came back, won an MVP, opted out of that deal. It really looked like at that time, Alex Rodriguez had a very good chance to win multiple MVPs, multiple World Series, and someday be the home run king. Since 2007, 2008, when all the steroid stuff came out, he's slowed down. I'm not saying that's because of steroids. I'm just saying he's kind of slowed down as an overall player, and his production's come down. He's had some injuries, so we'll see. I don't think that he's going to top Barry Bonds at this point, but I think when he retires, he will probably have 700-plus home runs, at least 600, 650.
For shortstop, I got Derek Jeter. In the 2000s, he batted .302 with 161 home runs, and he doesn't put up the best stats. Those are great stats, don't get me wrong, but he's known for just playing the game the right way, really. Gold gloves, he's been to 9 playoffs, 3 pennants, and has won 2 World Series. He's the captain of arguably the best team during the 2000s, the New York Yankees.
Yeah, no question. They're a team that dominated the early 2000s. Derek Jeter or Alex Rodriguez, we did hear the name. Also, we did hear the name Nomar Garciaparra mentioned. Those were really the 3 shortstops coming into this decade that looked to have the brightest future. But Nomar kind of fizzled out about 2006, 2007. He's now working at ESPN. A-Rod obviously got traded to the Yankees, moved to third base. So really, Derek Jeter was clearly the best shortstop during this era. 10 seasons, he had .302, 161 home runs, 727 RBIs, 219 stolen bases, a .456 slugging percentage. He won the Hank Aaron Award in 2006, the World Series MVP in 2000, the final year of their, I believe, 3-peat All-Star Game MVP 2000. He won a Gold Glove in 04, 05, and 09. He won a Silver Slugger 2006 through 2008. So clearly, Derek Jeter was the best shortstop during this era, Justin.
No doubt. Once again, we all agree. This guy has a resume of awards that he has won in the 2000s era. He's doing a great job with the New York Yankees. Right now, current season, the 2012 season, Derek Jeter is doing a fantastic job, has a solid batting average. He's batting, 300 right now to be precise. 7 home runs, 25 RBIs, and I think he's going to have... I think the Yankees will extend him, and he will officially retire in about 2 or 3 years. I think he has 2 or 3 years left on him. He's going to play after this contract, and then the Yankees are going to sign him to maybe about a 1-year contract. Derek Jeter, love the guy to death, one of my favorite players. This guy has just been great. I mean, I really appreciate what he's done with this team. He's led them to multiple World Series wins, and he's probably the greatest shortstop in the 2000s era. Yeah,
no question, he's the greatest shortstop. One of the better shortstops that the game has ever seen. Now, he's not the greatest Yankee of all time. People take it a little far with that. Longevity, he's probably going to spend He has 1 year left on his deal with the Yankees after this, and I have a feeling things could get ugly like they almost did after his last contract dispute. So we'll see what happens. Derek Jeter, no doubt one of the best winners that the game has ever seen. We'll begin in the outfield and the left field, and as much as I'd like to say somebody else because no one really is that big of a fan of this guy, Barry Bonds, hands down. He had 73 home runs in 2001 to set the MLB record. That alone almost clinched him being on this list. But then you take into account what he did during this time, through all the steroid battles, through everything. Barry Bonds had a great 2000s era. And keep in mind that he didn't play in 2006 for most of the year with leg problems. And then he retired after 2007. So you're only talking about 6 or 7 seasons during this era. And in that time, he had 322 with 317 home runs, 697 RBIs, 54 stolen bases, a 724 slugging percentage, and this list of awards is long. He won an MVP in 2003, 2005, and 2007. He won a Silver Slugger in 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2005, 2007, 2008. He won the Hank Aaron Award 2001 through 2003 and in 2007 again, and he won a Gold Glove in 2002 and 2003, and that shows you that Barry Bonds once was a great fielder. Towards the end there, he wasn't quite the same fielder, and as much as we might have not have liked Barry Bonds, and obviously he's going to be remembered for cheating for the most part, and not necessarily positive things, what he did in this era certainly was pretty much unmatched, John.
Yeah, no question. I also have him for my left fielder. If you think about it, he's probably one of the most dominant players in this whole decade. Like you said, his stats, 317 home runs, batted .322, 4-time MVP. I mean, you summed it up pretty well. One of the better players during this era.
You guys pretty much summed it up. But what's really holding Barry Bonds down is he has not won the World Series in his career, and that should have been the icing on the cake. And if you didn't cheat, this guy, first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt about it.
Yeah, no question. He's not going to be there in all likelihood. I know that a lot of people think that just because he's the home run king, really, he's not going to be. And the sad part with Barry Bonds is he would have been a first ballot Hall of Famer even before using steroids, but he cheated and he will not be in the Hall of Fame because of that. In center field, we have Ichiro. Even though he played a lot of this era in right field, it is important to remember that he did play in center field at times too. In 9 seasons during this era, he had 333 with 84 home runs, 515 RBIs, 341 stolen bases, and the awards list for him is almost as long as Barry Bonds. In his rookie season, he became one of 2 guys to win the MVP in their rookie season. In 2001, he won to win the MVP and Rookie of the Year in the same season. He won a Gold Glove in 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So every season he won the All-Star Game MVP in 2007, and he won the Silver Slugger Award in 2001 and 2007. Absolutely was one of the guys that you like to root for during this era. Certainly he was one of the few guys, especially outfielders in this era, that we don't remember for their great power hitting. But Ichiro still today is one of the best hitters in the MLB and is approaching some scary numbers considering how long he has been in America, Justin.
Yeah, Ichiro Suzuki, since arriving on the scene in 2001, this guy went straight to work. He's coming over from, don't hold this against me, I think was he Japanese, guys?
Yeah.
The Japanese import. This guy, in the 9 seasons, from 2001 all the way heading over to 2009, this guy has averaged over 200 hits. He's probably the best Seattle Mariners player ever.
Yeah, he's certainly. Yeah, I think that you say that there haven't really been that many great Seattle Mariners players that have played long term with that team. So you're probably right about the best Seattle Mariners player ever, and he's probably the best overall hitter of the 2000s, John.
Yeah, no question. He's not my center fielder though. My center fielder, he didn't play center field at all, actually, but I went with him anyway. Sammy Sosa. His 2000 numbers, he batted .282 with 273 home runs. He was obviously the better player in the 90s, but he still averaged out more than 100 RBIs. He played for the Cubs, the Orioles, and the Rangers during the 2000s. One of the most dominant power hitters. He only went to 1 playoffs during the 2000s, but he won the Silver Slugger 3 times.
Yeah, and I'll start off with my right fielder because that's where I have Sammy Sosa. In 7 seasons in the 2000s, you mentioned how well he played in the late 90s. Everyone remembers the home run chase of 1998 with him and Mark McGwire that really brought a lot of fans back to baseball. But with Sammy Sosa in 7 seasons in the 2000s, it's really surprising when I looked back at how good he was in the 2000s. In 2007 with the Rangers, everyone remembers him coming back pretty much just to get over 600 home runs, but he had 21 home runs that year for the Rangers. He was decent with the Orioles, and then everyone remembers Sammy Sosa, the captain of the Cubs, every day on those afternoon games sprinting out to right field in Wrigley Field. That's one of the earlier memories I have of watching baseball, is watching Sammy Sosa sprint out to right field before every game. And in 7 seasons in this era, he had 282 with 273 home runs, 726 RBIs, 10 stolen bases, a 570 slugging percentage. And early on in this era, he really got robbed of a few awards, again, because of the steroid era. Now, it's hard to feel bad for Sammy Sosa. You feel bad for Jeff Kemp because he doesn't have a connection to steroids, but Sammy Sosa had the corked bat. He had a positive steroid test in 2003, so what he was doing was most likely artificial too, but the numbers he was putting up early on in the 2000s, in any other type of season, he would have been a multiple-time MVP, but he got robbed in the late 90s from McGwire, and then in the early 2000s, he got robbed by Barry Bonds, so really, Sammy Sosa is one of the better power hitters this game has ever seen, currently tied for 7th on the all-time home run list, but by the time you're watching this video, there's a very good chance that Jim told me the Baltimore Orioles has broken that. So, Justin, who do you have in right field?
In right field, I didn't really go by outfield. I just picked the top 3 that we chose. I chose Vladimir Guerrero. This guy, the 2004 American League MVP award winner. This guy is still going strong after quite a while. He's 37 years old. This guy wants to be on an MLB team. This year, he's not having the greatest success of being on a team. I mean, the Toronto Blue Jays gave him a shot, and then they kept him down in the minors for a long time. Vladimir Guerrero decided to opt out of his contract. He is currently a free agent, still looking for a home. I understand where this guy is coming from. This guy, in the 2000s era, he was a All-Star in 2000, 2001, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 2010, but don't mark that down. Greatest accomplishment being the American League MVP in 2004, the 8-time Silver Slugger. This guy will be on a team, and I guarantee it, he still has records he wants to get at, and he will reach those record points before he retires.
Yeah, he also wants to win his first World Series. A lot of people are going to remember him with the Angels throughout this decade, but I actually remember him as a Montreal Expo because I watched a lot of NL East baseball, being a Phillies fan, so I remember Vladimir Guerrero, how dominant he was. I remember him hitting the bat slipped out of his hand, and he hit a home run with just his right arm alone in Olympic Stadium. He was out of the raw power that I've ever seen. He'd be right up there with guys like Adam Dunn and Giancarlo Stanton as just the most naturally gifted power hitters that I've ever seen in my life. John, who do you have in right?
I also have Vladimir Guerrero, and Justin summed that up pretty well.
Alright, now we will move on to the DH, that's where I put Vladimir Guerrero, so I pretty much just summed up my thoughts on Vlad. Great hitter. Everyone, though, kind of remembers him with the Texas Rangers, how badly he fielded when they moved to the NL Park in the World Series a few years ago against the San Francisco Giants. But when he was in his prime, Vladimir Guerrero had a cannon of an arm out in right field. So, John, who do you have as your DH?
I got Manny Ramirez. He dominated this era. He batted .317 with 348 homers. He was a World Series MVP and won the Silver Slugger numerous times. The thing he'll always be remembered for is that he never won an MVP, and he might be the greatest hitter to never win an MVP. If you look at this guy's stats, all the way from the Indians to the Red Sox to the Dodgers, he produced in almost every single season.
No question, Justin. Who do you have as your DH?
I had Manny Ramirez as well, man. John really summed it all up. Manny being Manny, if you guys all remember that time where he went into the Green Monster in Boston. That guy cracks me up every time he plays. As of late, he had a contract with the Oakland Athletics, but he's currently a free agent looking for a home. And to be honest with you guys, Manny's done. But in his early days, Manny being Manny days, you know what? Manny Wood in L.A., I had a good time seeing Manny play in the Dodgers organization for a little while. Manny just dominated the 2000s era, man.
Yeah, and obviously then you remember him as a Boston Red Sox, and I believe early on in 2000s he was still with the Cleveland Indians for the first year or two as well. He was a great overall player, one of the most clutch players during this era as well, especially in the playoffs. Again, though, another guy that we kind of put a negative spin on because he was suspended numerous times for failing steroid tests, for taking women's pregnancy pills, and he came up on that list that came out with A-Rod's name and David Ortiz as people that tested positive for steroids on the anonymous list in 2003 that somehow wasn't very anonymous. So that is our regular lineups. We're going to go to the pitching in a second, but we do have some honorable mentions, and some of these will be repeats that we just decided to leave out on, or certain guys. If John thought one guy was better than I did, and I'd put the guy on my honorable mentions list. My 5 honorable mentions are Mike Piazza, who I think, if you take the last half of the 90s and the first half of the 2000s, Mike Piazza, to me, is one of the top 5 catchers that's ever played this game, the best overall power-hitting catcher that ever played this game. But unfortunately for him, during this era, he moved to first base later on in his career. His better days were in the late 90s and early 2000s. I have Jim Thome, who is my favorite player of all time. Jim Thome is one of the best overall power hitters, as I mentioned, over 600 home runs in his career. Unfortunately, during this era, though, he was not better than Albert Pujols at first base, so it was kind of difficult. He played with the Indians. This is kind of a long list during this era. He played with the Indians, the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Minnesota Twins, and then obviously there was a little bit more after that. But those are the teams that he played with during the 2000s. Chipper Jones, if A-Rod had stayed playing short, Chipper would have been a lock to be the third baseman. Even though for a few years in the 2000s he did play left field, for the most part Chipper Jones was clearly the best third baseman during this era. Even though he won his MVP, I believe, in the 90s, Chipper Jones had a great run in the 2000s. Carlos Beltran, people underrate him because everyone remembers Carlos Beltran, Mets and beyond, but he was a really good overall player when he was with the Kansas City Royals. I've seen a lot of lists say that he was one of the top 10 players of the 2000s. I kind of disagree with that, but he was a great player, and you can't forget the run that he had during the 2005 playoffs with the Houston Astros, where he just absolutely went off, then got paid by the Mets after that. And Lance Berkman, also another mention, the Big Puma. In any other era, Lance Berkman's probably at least the DH. He did play some outfield during this era as well, but because of the steroids and Lance Berkman presumably being clean, he does not make the actual list. Justin, who are your honorable mentions?
My honorable mentions, Tim, you have some of the players that you spoke of on my honorable mentions list. I got Chipper Jones at number 1, Jorge Posada, a big part of the Yankees' success in the early 2000s. Mike Piazza at number 3. Number 4, I got Carlos Beltran. And at number 5, a lot of people have overlooked this guy. I got Troy Glaus. If you guys remember, Troy Glaus, the 2002 World Series MVP of the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. This guy just destroyed the San Francisco Giants. This guy batted .385 in the World Series with 3 home runs, 8 RBIs. And you know what? This guy is going to be a future Hall of Famer. No doubt about it. Even though after his career really died down after his time with the Atlanta Braves, after just one season, you know what? I think this guy is going to be a Hall of Fame in the future, but
the numbers you can maybe say that he would have been, but the problem is he has a connection to HGH as well, so in all likelihood he won't be. But yeah, again, in this era, he played really well with the Angels. He was with the Diamondbacks for a year. I think he had 48 home runs that year. He was with the Toronto Blue Jays, so he certainly had a great run during the 2000s, and that's an interesting name that, again, in any other era, he's probably on the starting list, but, well, he was using the drugs too, but you get my point. John, who do you have as your honorable mentions?
I got number 1 is Ichiro Suzuki. Like we said, if this guy stayed in or came to MLB a little earlier, he'd probably already be the all-time hits leader, or at least close up there. Number 2, Chipper Jones. He beat number 1 any other era, but A-Rod was in this one. Ryan Howard, he won a Rookie of the Year and MVP during this era. One of the more underrated hitters in this era is Maglio Ordonez, and
no
I put
question. That is it. That's a great name.
And the last one, I got David Ortiz.
David Ortiz is interesting too because he's another guy that helped end the curse. The problem is he's more of a guy that comes on 2003, 2004. That's where he comes on as like really a star in the league. He wasn't much of a star when he was with the Minnesota Twins, and I think we all know why. But when he's playing with the Boston Red Sox, David Ortiz was he's still with the Red Sox obviously, but during this era, he helped end the curse. He won another World Series in 2007. Obviously, more steroid stuff came out about him, as it did with many of the great sluggers during this era. The one thing that kind of holds him back, I guess, a little bit is just the fact that he was a DH and didn't play the field, so maybe you hold that against him a little bit. But David Ortiz during this era, no doubt, was a tremendous player. Now, in terms of our pitching staffs, I tried to put it in order of who I believe had the best overall numbers and did the most for their team during the 2000s era. It is important to remember that certain divisions were better than other divisions and things like that. So I'm going to begin with my ace, and I'm going to go with Johan Santana. There were a few other guys on my list that certainly I would have had as an ace, but Johan Santana during this era spent most of his time with the Minnesota Twins, had a record of 122-60 with a 3.12 ERA in 310 games, through over 1,700 innings, had over 1,700 strikeouts. The awards that he won during this time, in 2004 and 2006, he won the Cy Young with the Minnesota Twins. 2007, he won a Gold Glove. He had the lowest ERA in the MLB in 2004 and 2006. He had the lowest ERA in the NL in his first season with the New York Mets in 2008. Actually, yeah, no, that was his first season. And he led the AL in strikeouts in 2004, 2005, and 2006. So, Justin, who are you going to go with as your ace of the 2000s era?
You summed it up. I got Johan Santana, my friend.
John, what about you?
As my ace, I got Randy Johnson. If you look at this guy's stats, he flat out dominated this era. Was the NL Cy Young 3 times, won the World Series in 2001, won the ERA title 2 times, 2001, 2002, played for the Diamondbacks, Yankees, and Giants. But this guy's numbers are ridiculous. He won 143 games and had a 3.34 ERA through the whole 2000 era.
The guy that I'm going to go with as my number 2 starter is the Rocket, Roger Clemens. Now everyone remembers him at this point as that guy that's in quarter all the time and everything, and is a douchebag, everything like that. But as an overall pitcher, he's one of the best pitchers of all time in terms of numbers. He won't be in the Hall of Fame because of his connection with HGH. But during this era, he won 170 games, lost 50, had a 3.34 ERA in 229 games, won numerous World Series titles with the Yankees, came close with his hometown Houston Astros, I almost said Houston Rockets, Houston Astros. He won the AL Cy Young in 2001, won the NL Cy Young in 2004, and had the lowest ERA in the National League in 2005. In this era, he also had over 1,350 strikeouts. And it's important to remember that he pitched in the AL East during this time, and the AL East in most years was considered the best overall division. Justin, who are you going to go with as your number 2?
My number 2, I got Roy Halladay. If you guys remember back in 2002, after a year down in the minors, Roy Halladay really came back to the MLB with new life in 2002 with the Blue Jays. In the first year back, 19-7 with a 2.93 ERA. I mean, it was a great season overall for the guy. And then when he came in 2009 in his final season, I shouldn't say, because he came to the Phillies in 2010, Roy Halladay, 17-10 with a 2.79 ERA. This guy shuts down many teams, and this guy is a strikeout machine. I think he's a solid number 2 guy overall in the early 2000s era, man.
John, what about you?
My number 2 is Johan Santana, who's both your guys' ace, and you guys both summed that up perfectly.
Alright, as my number 3 guy, I'm going to go with Doc, Roy Halladay. Now he's with the Phillies, but throughout the series with the Toronto Blue Jays. He's a legend in Toronto. And I'm not going to really hold it against him that he was not in the playoffs, because this is who was the best pitchers during this era. And Doc was really one of those guys in this era. He threw, by far, led the 2000s era in complete games. In 10 seasons, had 139 wins, over 1,800 innings pitched, 1,400 strikeouts, and a 3.40 ERA. Had a 2003 Cy Young Award to add on to that, and he's won one since in this new decade. But during this era, he was one of the best, by far, one of the best pitchers. And if he wasn't on the Toronto Blue Jays, we'd probably be talking about him as a multiple-time world champion as well. But unfortunately for him, the Blue Jays were not necessarily one of the better teams during this era. So, Justin, who's your number 3 starter?
At number 3, I got Roger Clemens. You pretty much summed that up. So,
John, who do you have?
I got Roy Halladay. Like you said, never pitched in the postseason, but he won the Cy Young in 2003. His numbers, he had 139 wins with a 3.40 ERA. He probably could, his numbers could have been a lot better if he had a better offense and was on a better team overall. If this guy was on someone like the Yankees or even the Phillies for the late parts of the 2000s, his numbers would have been even more crazy, and we'd be probably talking about him as number 1.
Yeah, no, I really think that we would be talking about him as number 1. It's not a knock at the Blue Jays, but they just weren't necessarily a great team during this era. The guy I'm going to go with as my number 4 starter is CC Sabathia. People forget how good he was during this era when he was with the Cleveland Indians. He won a Cy Young in 2007, and throughout this era came up as a really strong pitcher, was absolutely dominant for the Milwaukee Brewers in 2008 after being acquired at the trading deadline, and also came to the Yankees in 2009 and was able to help propel them to their first World Series title since 2000 as well. So CC Sabathia pretty much did it all during this 2000s decade. Alright, Justin, who do you have as your number 4 starter?
my number 4 starter, I got Randy Johnson, who really kicked off the 2000s with the Arizona Diamondbacks, coming over in 1999, but he really started kicking it off in 2000. Overall stats for this guy, he's a 10-time All-Star, career highlights I should say. He's a 10-time All-Star, making the All-Star team with the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2000 and 2001, 2002, and also in 2004, his final year with the team. He also went to the New York Yankees from 2005 and 2006, and before returning to the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2007-2008, and finished up his career in 2009 with the San Francisco Giants. Randy Johnson, in the 2000s era, pitched a perfect game against the Atlanta Braves, was it, guys?
Yeah, it was against the Atlanta Braves, and he became the oldest pitcher in that game to throw a perfect game.
And he also, he's a great pitcher, and you know what, he should be possibly the number 2 best pitcher in the 2000s era, because, you know what, Roy Halladay, yes, I had him above him. Roy Halladay is this guy could strike out a lot of guys. You know what, it was just a big, hard predictions list, and I had to go with Randy Johnson number 4, so it was what my heart went with.
Yeah, no, Randy Johnson had a tremendous 2000s, and if you put together his whole career, the fact that he was so successful pitching through the steroid era really shows that behind Sandy Koufax and Steve Carlton, he might be the best lefty that's ever pitched in the game, and he's one of the better pitchers that's ever pitched all time, because there wasn't really an era that was harder to pitch in than the era that Randy Johnson pitched most of his career in, and he did a tremendous job. As you mentioned, got his 300th win in 2009 with the San Francisco Giants, so he did a tremendous job there as well. As we look to our John, did you say your 4 starter yet?
No, mine's Pedro Martinez. Played for the Red Sox from 2000 to 2004, Mets 2005 to 2008, and played in 1 season in Philadelphia. And the 1 season he did is when he got signed late in the season and they played the New York Yankees in the World Series. His stats: he won 112 games and had a 3.01 ERA, won the Cy Young in 2000, and led the AL in strikeouts in 2000 and 2002. He was flat out dominant in this era and probably should be higher, but there's a lot of really good pitchers.
Yeah, early on in the 2000s, in his Red Sox days, was really where he was at his best. And then earlier on, when he pitched with the Dodgers and the Expos, he was incredible there as well. But with the Red Sox was really where he's in his prime. He was a great pitcher. I'm not trying to take away anything from him, but what I'm going to remember is the Yankees, Who's Your Daddy. I'm not talking about when they tried to bring it back up when he was with the Phillies, but I'm going to remember Grady Little pulling him out of Game 7 of the 2003 NLCS, and then Aaron Boone hitting that walk-off home run to send the Yankees to the World Series. And quite frankly, I miss those Red Sox and Yankees ALCS because those were just classic every single season. At my number 5 spot, I have the big unit, Randy Johnson. I touched on him. I'll just go over some of the awards during this era. He won the NL Cy Young in 2000, 2001, and 2002, so 3 years straight. He won the co-MVP of the World Series in 2001. He had the lowest ERA in the National League in 2001 and 2002, and he led the NL in strikeouts 2000 through 2004. He was dominant. When he went to the Yankees, it really just did not work out. Randy Johnson was just not really a big market type of guy, but as an overall pitcher, one of the best that this game's ever seen, Justin.
Alright, rounding up my pitching rotation, I got CC Sabathia. Tim, you pretty much summed it up, my friend.
John, who do you have at number 5?
At number 5, I got Roger Clemens. He won an AL Cy Young in 2001 and an NL Cy Young with the Houston Astros in 2004. He played for the Yankees and Astros in the 2000s. He had 2 stints with the New York Yankees. Pitched great, actually. He won 107 games with a 3.34 ERA and 229 games pitched. He was getting old in this era, but yet he still dominated, which is crazy. He probably should be a little higher, but like I said, this whole era has been filled with great pitchers.
No question. And then the final position we have, which is pretty much a no-brainer. I guess there's maybe a few other candidates, but none that dominate. You could make a really good case for Trevor Hoffman, but I'm going to go with Mariano Rivera as my greatest closer, not only of this era, but of all time. And he had a tremendous, did a tremendous job throughout this era, got to over 500 saves in this era, and then got to over 600 last season. Mariano Rivera, hands down, probably the best closer of all time. One of the best guys in the playoffs, has an ERA under 1 career in the playoffs. The only time that he ever really messed up in the playoffs was blowing the 2001 World Series, but he also saved a few World Series in the 2000s as well. In 2000 in the Subway Series against the New York Yankees, and he did save some games in 2003 against the Mets, yeah. And in 2003 he saved some games against the Fish, and then in 2009 he did shut down the Phillies to end the World Series as well. So Mariano Rivera, one of the most clutch closers, and a guy whose career at this point looks like it might be in jeopardy, but we'll see what happens after the season when he comes back from a torn ACL. Do either of you guys really disagree? Do you want to say Trevor Hoffman had a better run in the 2000s than Mariano Rivera?
I agree with you, Tim. You can also, like you said, you can make a case for Trevor Hoffman, but you know what? Overall, Mariano Rivera, this guy is the best closer in the 2000s.
Yeah, I also got Mariano, and I think he's the best closer of all time.
Yeah, there's a few other guys you can mention all time. Lee Smith, Dennis Eckersley, Trevor Hoffman's right in the mix. So closer's relatively a new position. That is our 2000s MLB Dream Team. Throughout this week, we're going to be giving you a ton of MLB Dream Teams, countdowns, everything. So it's going to be a fun week here on The Real Sports Talk. I'm going to have a fun week on the beach, and all you guys need to go check out therealsportstalk.wordpress.com. Follow me on Twitter at CashKelly_TRST. Follow Justin at, Justin, what's your Twitter?
At the Justin Godsey.
The Justin Godsey. And follow John at John Burns, JOHN Burns_MLB. Like The Real Sports Talk on Facebook. And we will be back tomorrow to bring you even more coverage of the history of the MLB.